Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another edition of Texting with me, Tomek, in St. Petersburg.
And I'm Mark Will, also known as the Stranger in Taipei. What are we
Very
talking
nice.
about today, Daddy?
Well, this topic is daunting for me because it's just so wrapped up in nostalgia, emotion. We're discussing Michael Jackson, which already is a huge topic, and I've chosen the album History, which for me
Not the
is
whole album.
no, the second disc.
Mm-hmm.
So History is not maybe the natural choice for a casual Michael Jackson fan or just a person in pop culture. It's not as iconic as albums like Thriller and to some extent Bad or Off the Wall. Even you could say Dangerous. It's almost like a
Mm-hmm.
B-side Michael Jackson album, which is not to say it still wasn't huge and people still know the big hits off the album. But it's my personal favorite. That might be because of when it came out and my age, which it came out in 1995. I was 12, 13, 14, that age when it was really hitting. And
And you were already a fan at that point?
yep, I loved Dangerous. It was a really important album for me. And
When did that come out? 90 what?
91, 91.
Okay.
And so I think I was at the age where I was kind of interested in, justice and that kind of
You're not
teenage.
now?
Well, now I'm more, a bit more jaded, but even the annoying self-righteousness that you would often cite about my earlier incarnation, Michael like stirred up a lot of those emotions. Like I wanted to defend him. I wanted to fight for him against the bad press and the horrible name calling that my peers were using, when all the
Okay.
allegations came up. And it fit my type 4 Enneagram personality perfectly. So I'm an individualist and Michael's an individual, and we're going to stand up to the big bad spirits out there who are trying to bring him down, the uncouth and the ruffians. So this album is an impassioned, aggressive, and pitying album in which
Self-pitying.
self-pitying in which he just vents all of this stuff, which maybe wasn't so much of a trademark of previous albums. He might have like touched on it a little bit in Dangerous, some issues with fame, but nothing to the extent of History, which is real airing out of the laundry, and it's a plea, it's a fight back, it's all those things, but it doesn't have that kind of smooth, soulful accessibility of earlier works.
Well, I don't know. I think it does.
It has
And
maybe some moments,
yeah.
but
I,
anyway, so
let's get into it
yeah,
because I think this is going to be a
yes.
marathon session.
Okay, so really quickly, folks, History is the ninth studio album by Michael Jackson. It was released on June 20th, 1995. It was released as part of a double album. The first disc was also 15 songs long, and it's a greatest hits album. And the second disc is all new material. And I will say it's the best-selling double disc album of all time, apparently. So even though it doesn't compare with Thriller for album sales, it was still successful. Although I will say that the kind of media blitz against him dented sales to some extent, and you could say he's already in a decline at this point, and many, even Michael Jackson fans, will consider this his last kind of seminal work, and that everything after this is notably worse in terms of quality and consistency. And I would agree with that. So, yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
Mark, we discussed kind of. We know that a lot of topics will come up. That is such a massive topic. It's like talking about. I don't know. It's like talking about Jesus Christ, or it's talking about such a massive figure that ends up saying so much about us and our culture. I mean, it's like a lens to talk about sexuality, to talk about race, to talk about media, talk about pop. It's and the effect of all those things on a human being. So who knows where you could talk all day and all night against this like mirror, or I don't think I'm articulating that right, but he is just this focal point which you could go anywhere with. So it is daunting, but we just thought we would do a track by track analysis and use that as a springing point, a springing board for those potential discussions. Yeah, is there anything you want to say before we jump into the first track?
No, let's just get into it.
Okay, track one, which is also the first single on the album. Although we did say we would talk about the teaser, so should we talk about the teaser first?
We can, yeah.
All right. So you go ahead and grab the reins for a little bit.
Well, I mean, my first impression was this is fascistic. I mean, you've got fake Italian, you've got fake Cyrillic, you've got fake runes,
What's
um,
that?
runes,
What are
you know,
those?
well, like Nordic runes, like the writing system that the Nazis sometimes used.
Okay.
You can see those on the armbands of this pop army or whatever it is. You
Right.
described it as pseudo Soviet style.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what are we to make of this? Like, what is he trying to communicate with this? I don't understand the purpose of it. You've got first of all, you've got this statue
Wait,
of
wait,
a
let's rewind a tiny bit just to tell people what we're discussing. So, Michael
mm,
released a trailer for the album. It's 2 minutes and 10 seconds long. Uh, you can find it on YouTube. And okay,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a promo. It's a
right,
teaser for the album that's coming out, almost as if it were a movie, right? It's like a
mm-hmm.
it's like a trailer,
Right,
basically.
right.
You know, and even now, after having listened to the album in its entirety, and I'd never done that before, I still don't understand the connection really, other than it alludes to the cover art, which, you know, how does this relate to all of these uh, songs with the theme of trauma and I don't know, lost childhood, pain and suffering. Like you've got this Peter Pan figure uh, wearing bandoliers, trying to look like some sort of military figure. Uh, what's the purpose of that? Why does a helicopter fly between the statue's legs? Why is there an explosion uh, when the statue is unveiled? Why are there girls fainting and children screaming, "Michael, I love you"? Like what? It's so unironic, you know. It's like he's completely embracing King of Pop, and it literally says that on signage at least once or twice in the trailer. It's like some kind of movie blockbuster movie trailer, right? But I don't understand its connection to the material on the actual album. Can you
Well,
explain that?
there's no that is not important at all. This is just a tool for hype and hyping the Michael Jackson all powerful aura. That's all it is. So it's like reminding us Michael's back. A Michael album is something that the world needs to stop and take notice of. This is going to be like a huge occasion. And so it's just about, and first of all, like to some extent, this is based on a lot of reality in the sense that a Michael concert could include high levels of hysteria, and Michael's appearances anywhere were still like, oh shit, Michael's gonna be here, boom, 50 to 100 paparazzi immediately there, right? Like screaming fans wherever. I mean, this is a guy who outside the courtroom when he was when he was testifying, he'd be swarmed by mobs of crowds. You know, I remember one insane. He got on top of a car once, out just outside the courtroom in California, and was like dancing on top of a car. You know, to like thousands of adoring fans, and then he was going in to testify. So I'm just saying, like, that's something that he's obviously playing into here, and he's indulging in it. But it was also reality. Is my point? He's not necessarily.
Well, but I think it's more than that. He's embracing it. You know, unironically, as I say. You know, it's one thing to recognize that reality, as you say, but to embrace it without any kind of there's no sense of humor about it. You know, don't you find that somewhat
I think is
problematic?
If there's yes, absolutely, of course, and part of me finds it completely ridiculous, lowbrow, absurd, and like sophomoric. However, I will just say, like many things of Michael, it leaves the question, maybe there is some sense of wink wink with all this. And if so, then it starts to become more interesting. I've discussed this trailer with a few friends and colleagues this week. And one is Carlos, who I've introduced you to recently, and is a very bright guy and was a Michael fan at the time. And he just said, "Oh, bro, just aesthetic. It's just aesthetic." He likes this aesthetic. It's nothing to do with. We shouldn't do any interpretation via narcissism or via politics. This is just like an aesthetic that is interesting for him and like exciting for him. And the last person I'll cite is a student I had yesterday, Nika, who's I think she's 19. And she's really into like Beyonce. And she loved the trailer because out of all the stuff that I sent her, which I sent her all the history videos, it was her favorite thing because she just said it was provocative. She found it, and that's an interesting word to use. And yeah, I think it's like it's so over the top that it's like exciting. You know, it's like of course you have to indulge in that, but maybe it just kind of creates this mythical fantasy realm that's like a guilty pleasure. Maybe it's like fun to just jump into that world of like, yeah, let's idolize him. Fuck it. I mean, Michael fans, for example, they are just like different breed of people. You know, I've been like watching some stuff this week. I'm not even in that category, despite being a mega fan. But
I could maybe accept that, like, you know, we're watching Top Gun or something, but it has to at least make sense, doesn't it? Like, I don't understand the narrative. Like, what is the statue? What is the actual character? What is that fucking dancing army? Are the fans like some kind of resistance movement, or are they like the populace subdued by Il Duce? I don't get it. You know, it doesn't make sense. Like, and I understand. I understand if you want to say it's not supposed to make sense. So it's just like a surrealist fascist nightmare or dream. I mean, you know, it's so absurd to me that I can't even analyze it.
Well, I'm saying, like, if
is Triumph of the Will just aesthetic? I mean, I don't know.
If the greatest emperor is entering some place, that's who he's casting himself as, you know, like the greatest Shah, the greatest historical person entering, and that's how he's received.
Well,
You
I
know,
did.
these
There it is kind of like the most decadent Roman emperor, but even then, the ceremony would at least make some kind of sense, wouldn't it? I mean, explain it to me. Like what the guy with the glasses, he flips one lens down,
right.
and then there's the explosion. What does that mean? What is that?
I mean, again, I can't speak to that level of specificity, but overall, I would just say it's the arrival of the greatest, most idolized human in that culture, and the security are not the bad guys. They have to keep the peace because the people are out of their minds when they are near this, you know, this
Okay,
figure.
the more we talk about it, the less I like it, or the more the more annoyed I am with it. So
Okay.
maybe we should get into the tracks.
Okay. First track, Scream, first single as well. It's with his sister Janet. They had never really worked together before, especially not in any high profile way. There were talks about this kind of collaboration happening for several years, but this is the first time the two of them really managed to work together in the studio. The production team behind the track are Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who typically work with Janet. So they helped her get massive success with
Nasty,
Rhythm
right?
Rhythm Nation. That was a huge album. So they're behind the sound, and especially in terms, I mean, it was a collaborative process, but a lot of that you could say is like their musical vision.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really powerful opening to the record. The sound is very harsh, metallic, sharp. The voice sounds really tough and almost like mangled, rough. Uh, so it's definitely a different aesthetical sound, but I feel like the beat is really hard and I like it. Like what I like, my point is, I guess, that it's not corny for a mainstream pop single. It's really bashing you, and I like when pop is not watered down, and so that's what I'm impressed by, given his level of reach at that point, that he could still kind of come with this kind of unrelenting sound. And I think that the words are also impressive, to have a hook just saying "stop pressuring me." It's
Mm-hmm.
really direct,
Which around the 3 minute mark becomes "Stop fucking with me."
and that was a yeah, "stop fucking me," I think, or I guess yeah, and it's lyrically, it's on paper it says "stop fucking with me," but I always just hear "stop fucking me," and that's also a good example of less is more kind of thing, because Michael has rarely cussed, and just to choose this one moment to change from pressuring to fucking kind of like heightens the power of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of the
It's
fucking.
yeah, it's quite noticeable. What I watched the video and I'm interested in the imagery. Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
2001 vibe,
Yep.
right? And then you've got this series of paintings. You've got a Warhol, you've got a Pollock, and you've got a Magritte.
Mm-hmm.
You know, any interpretation of that? Later, you've got a sort of Zen Buddhist posture and a rock garden, which
Mm-hmm.
aesthetically I like, but
Yeah,
like what? How do you interpret all that? Like
I think it's a great
what are they
video.
doing? What are they doing on the spaceship? Why the modern art? Why the Japanese garden reference? Uh, what about the paddle ball
Mm-hmm.
smashing of the vases? What's all that
Yeah,
about?
I don't know. It's a little bit like the Lennon quote about lyrics. Doesn't he say something like it doesn't have to make sense? So I think it's more creating a mood with different pieces of like aesthetical candy. It's a very like satisfying watch, I'd say, in terms of just how stimulating each image is and how clean it is. That, you know, using so many kind of digital effects, the zero gravity. Like we're impressed by that paddleball scene, for example. One thing that comes to mind for the shifting paintings is maybe just it kind of fits our scrolling generation of just like we need constant titillation.
Mm-hmm.
We see this great thing, but we just switch the channel. So
So
like
it's kind of like a premonition of that, because it would have been before
right.
scrolling, you know.
I guess I mean we have primitive scrolling. I guess you could say is like channel surfing.
Yeah, right.
Right. So there's maybe some of that there, and maybe that connects to the way that we read media in terms of just next.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was struck by the literalness of the scream. You know, the title is "Scream." He screams in this song, and actually,
Yeah.
it's the first of I would say many screams on this
Yeah.
record. You know, there's like the scream. It's almost like the primal scream that John Lennon was fascinated with, you know, when he did his first solo album after leaving the Beatles, the Plastic Ono Band album, right? When he was actually doing primal scream therapy, and he was screaming on his, literally screaming on that record, you know,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the song Mother. And so I was reminded of that uh, for the first time listening to this, but it just continues. There are several of these primal screams
Mm-hmm.
throughout the record. And you know, primal scream therapy was meant to take people back to the traumas of their childhood, you know,
Mm.
and childhood, of course, and childhood trauma. These are, of course, key to understanding this record in its entirety.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it sets the tone for much of the album in terms of just that, yeah, the response to the press and to the suffering that he's been experiencing
Mm-hmm.
as the target of all this. And again, which is not to say that he has zero culpability for some of that.
Well, um,
Is there anything else you want to say,
get into
particularly
that
about
now?
Scream? Or
Actually, I think there's another track we should save that discussion for.
okay,
But well, yeah, I would just say I also noticed the phrase "all the injustice." You mentioned injustice earlier, so that's,
mm-hmm.
you know, another key thematic element that's introduced here early on. But also, I was reminded of the song and the video for "Leave Me Alone" from the Dangerous
Mm-hmm.
album. You know,
Yeah, that's a
it's
great
like,
shout. Actually, that's from the Bad album.
oh, it's from Bad.
Yeah, interestingly.
It is,
Seriously,
okay.
it is. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I remember when that came out, and that is a very striking video.
I
I
like
mean,
that video.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I watched it again
It's kind
recently.
of like a collage thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that artist, whoever that artist is, did a video for the Talking Heads around the same time. Or if it wasn't the same artist, it's definitely the same style. But that, you know, that even though the song seems to be about a personal relationship, the video is more like talking to the public. Leave me alone, right? Not some individual person.
Right.
And so it's kind of
To
like
the media as well.
yeah. So it's kind of like a sequel to that.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
yeah, we can move on to track 2.
I would just say the other, maybe a slight other interesting thing is just at this time where Michael's very embattled. Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's quite important for him to kind of posture himself with his sister, who is more socially acceptable at the time. Like she didn't have the
Yeah.
same level of controversy, so it was a good
Well, that
time in
was
a way.
before her wardrobe malfunction with the
Yeah,
Timberlake at the Super
right.
Bowl, right?
Considerably before, and
Well,
And one thing
Janet, yeah, I would just say, I mean, Janet
sure,
to
sure.
me, I always think of Janet as the sweet little girlfriend of Willis on Different Strokes. I mean,
Okay.
that was my favorite TV show at the time, or not at the
Interesting.
time this came out, but at the time, Different Strokes was a thing, you know, with Gary Coleman and what you talking about, Willis? Willis was Gary Coleman's older brother, and his girlfriend was this sweet, uh, very normy girl played by Janet Jackson. I can't remember what she was called in the show, but she was the girlfriend, and she was just, you know, the girl next door. So I
Hmm.
always think of Janet that way. This is before Nasty and no, is that's her, right? What
Yeah, yeah. It is
uh,
nasty.
what have you done for me lately? That's Paula
That's Janet.
Abdul.
No, that's Janet
That's
too.
Janet too. Okay. So anyway, it was before all that, right? But yeah, she was still pretty vanilla, pretty safe and mainstream.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was, you know, that was a calculation. Uh, she's, I mean, I don't know if she offered it or he requested it or whatever, but she's showing solidarity. There's like
Right.
a a you know, brotherly sisterly hug, and they both look at the camera, and
Hmm.
she's almost like protecting him and saying,
Right.
look, world, I still love him, he's still my brother, I
Yeah,
still
and on
support him.
that note, there she appeared with him, I think, at the MTV Awards, and the shirt that she wore, she looked really good. Her titties were fucking fantastic, as usual with Janet. Sorry, whoever's listening is offended by that. Um, but I've
Trigger
always been a fan of
warning.
I've always been a fan of Janet Jackson's body. And on the back of this shirt, it says "Pervert 2." You know,
Oh,
like, and it was pretty cool. It was a nice statement. I was impressed by that. And Janet was like massive for me, especially like the Velvet Rope album. Maybe we'll talk about that on a future episode. But it was like a really healing album for me. And obviously she is a very sexual person, but I would say like I like that aspect of her.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so track two, I will say is my favorite song on the album,
Mine too.
and nice, and it's one of Michael's just greatest songs, I would say, and I don't think I necessarily felt like that right off the bat. So it took me some time to kind of
Mm-hmm.
really love this song, but it's called "They Don't Care About Us," um, and shall I talk about the controversy now, or because the controversy for me is absolutely central to the way that I experienced this song.
the
So
lyrical the lyrical controversy.
yes, the and
Well, I mean, uh, how did you experience it? Did you hear the original version or did you hear the radio edit?
I mean, I'm saying I heard the stories around it because the stories surfaced almost immediately upon the release of the album. And so, you know, at this point, again, I'm like this Michael fan who's like just cheering for him to get some wins basically after, you know, any kind of win. Uh and so the album drops, and then this scandal about this particular song starts tearing through the headlines, and it feels like this could do him in, you know? He's already got the child stuff, and now he's got on top of that, and I'm wanting him to sell well and so on. I want the album to do well, and he's got to explain himself for two words that come up in this song. So he says "Jew me, sue me" in one section, and then he says "kick me, kike me," both of which are anti-Semitic derogatory terms. He's called up on it, and he is shocked, disgusted that people should accuse him of racism or of some kind of malintent. And the quote that I shared with you is, "The idea that these lyrics could be deemed objectionable is extremely hurtful to me and misleading. The song, in fact, is about the pain of prejudice and hate and is a way to draw attention to social and political problems. I am the voice of the accused and the attacked. I am the voice of everyone. I am the skinhead, I am the Jew, I am the black man, I am the white man. I think that's like the main point. So he is extremely upset. So, and now it's on us to decide, like, how are we gonna, if we care, right? If we care, if we think, if we are the kind of person who could be offended, which I think is fine. Like, if we do want to be offended by that word being used, then the next job is, like, as a reader of poetry, do we interpret, are we offended by the way it's being used, or do we see it as him kind of actually, this is kind of showing solidarity with people who experience these words?
Yeah.
Right? Because then he says, I think he uses black as a verb as well in the song. Or maybe not, but anyway, it's like in similar ways. He's talking about what I've talked a lot. What do you think about, what did you make of all that?
As you're saying this, I'm thinking of another John Lennon song that I hadn't thought of before. I mean, to me, this is in the tradition of give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. I mean, it echoes that, doesn't it? All I want to say is, don't you hear an echo of all we are saying is? But so that's the, I consider it to be in the tradition of that kind of protest song, and it also reminds me of Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd. We don't need no education. The children's chorus, singing that. The chorus of this song reminds me of that in a way. But as you were talking, I was thinking of another John Lennon song that was very controversial. And the title was, and is to this day, you can find it on Spotify, I imagine. Certainly if you buy the CD, you can find it. The song is "Woman is the Nigger of the World." And, at that time, what was that, mid-70s, that was very controversial. Can you imagine such a song being released today?
I mean, but it has a progressive message, right?
So, exactly. I mean, it's not a racist song. It was meant to be feminist anthem, right?
And anti-race anthem, because
and that
it's not sympathetic to the N-word either.
But a lot of the backlash came from, guess who? Conservative white people, right? Like the people that were supposed to be protected from such horrible language were the biggest supporters of the song, So how does that relate to this? I mean, who was really offended?
Way, really quickly, he does use black as a verb. I wasn't wrong. So, it says, Jew me, sue me, everybody do me, kick me, kike me, don't you black or white me. So I'm just saying. So I guess, I mean, first of all, do you think it's possible that he is being, like, intentionally anti-Semitic here?
Is it possible?
Well, not is it possible, like, in, like, a mathematical sense, but, like, from your instinct, your gut instinct.
I doubt it. I mean, what would be the point of that?
Well, just if we think about, like, Kanye, who actually, this kind of reminds me of a song, like, Kanye had a really good song called Black Skinhead. And I don't want to spend a long time pulling up the lyrics right now. But yeah, I would just say that if Michael at this point is, like, upset about record execs or something, he might have some kind of, like, anti-Jew sentiment, which I would not. validate or stand behind in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying it's
Well,
not beyond possibility. I would
yeah,
say that he has some.
I guess so. Yeah, that's not impossible, but maybe it's not so straightforward as that. Like maybe, I mean, we could even question whether his intention is even relevant, right? Like whatever his intention, we can interpret it however we want, and we ought to at least be able to say that there are multiple interpretations possible. Like
Okay,
his argument that he's speaking against any kind of racism is, I think we can accept that, but at the same time, for him, maybe we can say it was a bit naive for him not to think that it could also be interpreted in another way, right?
And I think that's probably the most plausible reading, is that it was very naive. Like, because the cynical reading, well, one cynical reading is that he's racist, but I would say that's not that likely. I would say the other cynical reading is that he's like, again, beckoning controversy,
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of knows that this is going to stir up reaction. And then he's going to pretend like, what? How could you? Either way, I wish he hadn't done it, and but at the
isn't
same time,
isn't that kind of naivete characteristic of him? Like this,
yes,
he's got this Peter Pan complex, right? Like he thinks everything should be interpreted through the lens of childhood innocence, right? Like, of course, I'm just a child at play, just making a schoolyard comment. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I mean, even though what was he at that time? 40,
mm-hmm.
40 years old. I mean, and maybe that's an important part of our analysis here. This regression to childhood, not in the sense of primal scream therapy, confronting one's childhood traumas so as to fully realize oneself as an adult, but in order to remain in that state of childhood, or that mental space of childhood, even though one is actually an adult, and not only an adult, but like one of the richest and most successful adults on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, we have to say is incredibly naive. I retract what I said earlier. Like, why would he do that? I think you could argue that he knows very well what he's doing. Maybe we'll never know, but I think we do have to admit that possibility. At the same time, though, I think we have to admit that another interpretation is possible. Just the simplistic, vile racist intent. I don't think it's like that.
Right.
I mean, maybe one way to answer the question is to ask, who are they? They don't care about us. And who's us, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like they, do you think he meant the Jews? I mean, did he mean, on the one hand, he's saying he's both. In that comment you read, he's saying white and black, skinhead, and what was the other?
Jew.
You just read it. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I said
Skinhead
Jew,
and
yeah.
Jew, white and black. Right. So that's us and them, right? So, that's interesting because he's actually taking a side. They don't care about us, right? So who are they and who's us?
Yeah. And What do you think? I think it's too vague. I mean, I think it's like I don't think he would be able to articulate it in some kind of like concrete political language. And I think that's
Hmm.
okay, you know, it's not necessarily his job. He's allowed to just be an artist
Sure,
and
sure,
express
sure.
it
Well, I mean,
in these kind of
I think it's the powerless in any context, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
maybe they could be the Chinese government cracking down on its own citizens,
Right.
or maybe they would be the national security state, um, you know, oppressing basically the rest of the planet. Maybe it's the police beating up on black folk, you know. It,
Apparently this song has surfaced as an anthem of at BLM protests, by the way.
yeah, well, I think it fits,
So
you
let's
know.
talk a little bit about what we like about this track because both of us said it's a standout track for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the beat is great. It's this kind of really clattering, almost like military drum,
Yes.
and it's quite open and sparse, which I think gives a lot of space for us to hear Michael's voice clearly, almost with an a cappella feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the lyrics are impressive, I would say, despite what we've talked about. It's like got really good use repetition well, lots of short, choppy lines. Um, Skinhead, deadhead, everybody gone bad. Situation, aggravation, everybody allegation. It's yeah, the lyrics are pretty mesmeric, I would say, and then I like kind of the explosion at 3 minutes, the where you get some really nice shredding on the guitar and like some kind of waterfalling synthesizers, and he's saying, "We're deep in fire," so it really kind of like erupts later on. And yeah, I just think it's got lots of rises and builds. It's climatic. It's really grabbing
Yeah,
grabs.
it's raw. I mean,
It's raw.
it's emotional, it's powerful,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's not corny.
I like the I like the videos, the Brazil video and then the prison video, both of which were apparently directed by Spike Lee, who, of course, is no stranger to controversy.
And who often was one of Michael's most vocal defenders.
Yeah. And who
You know,
himself,
he,
I think, has
yeah,
probably been accused of anti Semitism at various times, right?
sure, yeah, absolutely. Almost in like the Farrakhan vein.
Yes.
Um, anything else what do you like about the track besides what you've already kind of said?
Um, Again, just that it seems to be part of that tradition of protest songs that I like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think there are echoes of it, maybe very conscious echoes. I mean, after all, and we'll talk about this later when we get to come together. Uh, he's the owner of the Beatles catalog, so he would be very familiar with the material in there, even though that's a John Lennon song that I'm talking about. But I don't know. Does he? Maybe he owns some of the solo Beatles stuff too, or did? You know, that's another story unto
Yeah.
itself. I know about how it was Paul McCartney that talked to him about music publishing. He's like, "Oh, I bought, Buddy Holly's catalog. You know, so anytime a Buddy Holly song is licensed, I get paid." And then Paul tells the story about how Michael said, "I'm going to get yours," and and he did.
And he ends up
And I
outbidding
just,
them, I think, which is
yeah. Well,
pretty cruel.
I found out today that he also apparently bought Eminem's catalog, and there was like a song Eminem did. There's a video in which Eminem parodies Michael Jackson with his hair on fire and he puts his head in the toilet. Is it called Lose It or something?
I know that song, but I may
Yeah.
have blocked out that traumatic memory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, anyway, Michael apparently, if this YouTube short is to be believed, tried to have it blocked, and when that didn't happen, he just bought the catalog, and you know, who had the last laugh?
I got to read up on that because I had never heard that connection. It's
I
interesting.
just found out today. But we should move on. We're here. We're already at 45 minutes, son,
Okay.
and we're
All
only
right.
on track 2.
All right. Track 3 is appropriate enough with me here in Mother Russia. It's called Stranger in Moscow. Whoever thought that I would end up in Moscow one day? And I think it's another exceptional song. So for me, the beginning of the album is fire. It's a song that grew on me over the years, and it's a slow ballad. It starts out with some like nice rhythm that pans between the left and the right headphone consistently. Very kind of classic MJ, and in the kind of the sound is like almost like a mouth rhythm, you know.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of like it's hard to know whether it's a mouth or whether it's a
Beatboxing.
beat, but yeah, like the beatbox flavor.
Well, I read this week that, sorry to interrupt, but I read this
No, no,
week
no,
that
no, no.
this is how he composed almost everything. Like he would start beatboxing into a tape recorder and then he would sing all the other parts, right? Like he wasn't competent really on any instrument,
Okay.
or so I read, but he would sing all the parts into a tape recorder, and then I think Björk does this too, but then he would pass it on to Quincy Jones or Jimmy Jam and Terry
Right.
Lewis or whoever he's working with, and they would arrange it, you know.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah, there's a it's
yeah, go on.
there's definitely that quality. I mean, this is a great track. It's a beautiful song, beautiful ballad. Um, I like the video with the rain. Um, it's just very
The video is
melancholic.
underwhelming for me, I will say.
Well, it just sets a mood, you know. I
Sure,
mean,
but I hoped for more, I guess.
and it's
Especially with the Russia alliance. I was
well,
hoping for some scenes.
yeah. I mean, as far as Russian themed pop songs go, I think I still prefer Sting's Russians from the mid '80s. If you've never heard that, I recommend it. But that's a classic Cold War, you know, appeal to reason on both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has the line, "What might save us, me and you, is if the Russians love their children too." You know, it's like trying to humanize the other side of the Cold War, which should be obvious even today, you dumb fucks. But you know, at the time, this is like the Reagan Thatcher era. That was like a revolutionary idea. What? Oh, the Russians love their children just like we do? You mean they don't
Yeah.
want to blow up the world? Uh yeah, a lesson which seems to have been forgotten. Not that
Very
we
briefly, you are
approve of what Pootie Poot is doing, people. Don't cancel us. It's possible to have two things in your mind at the same time. Try it.
so really briefly, you are a little bit choppy on my end.
Mm-hmm.
Are you noticing any of that or no?
You are choppy on my end occasionally, but I think Riverside will take care of all that.
Okay, no worries. So, um, yeah, the lyrics are interesting just because you know you wonder, is he writing this stuff by himself? Like, is he really? Michael doesn't strike me as someone who was massively interested in history, but maybe I'm undercutting him here, like unfairly. So, with lyrics like Kremlin's shadow belittling me, Stalin's tomb won't let me be, um, KGB was dogging me.
Yeah, some of that is almost buying into the American Cold War line, like naively.
Sure.
But maybe that's
Well,
how the
maybe naively,
stranger,
but
maybe that's how the stranger uh, in Moscow would feel. I mean, he happens to be an American stranger. And he actually
and
went there, right? Like it's based on his actual
yeah,
trip
he
to the
wrote this
Soviet
in
Union.
Moscow. Yeah,
Yeah.
he wrote this
So
in Moscow.
it's it's appropriate, but it's not a very politically sophisticated perspective, I would say.
Maybe, but let's not kid ourselves and say that there wasn't a massive atmosphere of repression. You know, there absolutely was. So, um,
Well, but this is
but
already 90 what? When did he go there?
sure, you were right. It would have been early '90s.
Yeah. So this is
But I mean,
already
if he's taking a more historical perspective, yeah, it's. I hear your point. So, yeah, I think the lyrics are great. Michael's ad-libbing throughout. He sounds great. I like that it's a ballad, but not a love song. It's like again, Michael tends to kind of bring a fresh perspective on pop and avoids cliche to some extent. Interestingly, that it ends with this KGB interrogator, which is read by a Polish guy, I'm guessing, because his name is Ed Wiśniewski, and the Russian that said it translates into English says, "Why have you come from the West? Confess, to steal the great achievements of the people, the accomplishments of the workers." So, that's kind of a funny note.
This is what, a sample?
Or Michael might have brought someone into the studio just to be like, "Hey, do some like Cold War Russian shit." That's kind of my impression. Like, give
No,
us
this
that
is at the end of
atmosphere.
the track.
Yes. You kind
Okay,
of hear like an outro.
Oh, I don't know if I caught that in the video. I'm not sure that's in the video
Okay.
because I didn't. I watched the video and listened. Maybe it was cut off at the end. Um, yeah. I mean, anyway, it's a nice tune. Like I found myself singing it this week after
Nice.
listening. It was floating around in my head for the last few days.
It's a nice rhetorical question too. How does it feel? I don't know. I like that as a repeating line.
Yes. Yeah. And
Okay,
well
should we move
sung,
on?
well performed, emotional performance.
Yeah.
Especially when he elevates to danger, baby. That's pretty spine tingling.
Yeah. I really like that part.
Yeah, well, at this point, as I was listening, I listened chronologically, but at this point, I stopped and took a detour. I went back and listened to "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough" and "Rock with You" from Off the Wall, and I realized that is my personal favorite Michael Jackson period. It just that that album, the production and I don't know, the danceability of it is just irresistible. Like as I'm listening to that, I'm realizing that my body can move in so many different ways than I thought possible. You know what I mean? Especially
And I think that
"Don't Stop Till You Get Enough." It's just so fun. Regardless of what it means, it's just a full body experience in a good way.
I love "Wanna Be Starting Something" too.
Sure,
on that album.
yeah.
I love that part. Yeah, and like I said, somebody who's not invested in the emotional like soap opera of Michael, that's like the classic music critic's choice is the Eyes Off the Wall.
Mm-hmm.
with honorable mention going to Thriller. And from then on, I think it becomes a little bit more like very personalized into fans who I just or into the
Well, I
cult
mean,
soap opera.
apart from any deep meaning, I always liked the way you make me feel uh, on bad. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
watched the video again, and it's actually a little bit creepy the way he's, you know, stalking that girl, and she's
Yeah,
she's laughing it off, but it seems strange. But it's a nice tune. It's a great. I always thought it was a very danceable and singable song. Um, but also on that album, we have "Man in the Mirror," and so even though he didn't write that, he was always able to um, effectively deliver these songs with important social messages, and that's a
that'll
tradition.
come up
Yeah.
really powerfully in Earth Song as well. Just
Okay.
saying, so you
Well,
might want to
yeah,
table that for a
but I
second.
mean, he's sort of that's a Motown tradition going back to Marvin Gaye and What's Going On. That's a
Mm.
landmark album. Berry Gordy, when Marvin Gaye uh, presented him with this album, Berry Gordy was very hesitant. He's like, "You can't be talking about this shit on a pop record." But they he finally convinced Berry Gordy to release it, and it was a huge success. And then Stevie Wonder had his socially conscious records, and it's good that Michael continued that tradition on occasion, right? With "Man in the Mirror" being a good example, and "They Don't Care About Us" being another
Yeah,
standout.
"Heal the World" was the standout track on "Dangerous." I'm not saying it was the best song, but it
Mm,
also was dedicated
yeah.
to social justice.
What do you think about the
Okay,
invocation of Roosevelt? This is going back to "They Don't Care About Us." If Roosevelt was living, he wouldn't let this
yeah.
be. If Martin Luther was
I
living,
mean, I liked
okay,
yeah,
yes,
I liked the Martin
he would
Luther.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah, he would definitely be raising his voice, and he did, and that's what got him killed. But FDR,
right.
friend of the working man or the black man or the oppressed, well, that's that's a, that's a harder case to make.
Yeah, and I guess again, I would just say that I don't look to Michael for high quality foreign policy analysis.
Hmm. Fair enough. All right, let's
But
keep going.
yeah, and that will again become very apparent later on when we're going to discuss in Money.
Hmm.
But okay, next track is "This Time Around." So the notable thing for me about this track, and maybe I shouldn't be starting each time. So if you think it's better for you to kickstart, no problem. All right, I'm not.
Well, we're
Let me know if
almost
you want
up
to be
on an
having the
hour
first
here.
take.
Well, I
Well, I
mean,
just mean in terms of like, yeah,
Biggie. Of course, that's the whole point of this track, right? Like, what else is there to say about it? And as soon as I listened, I turned on Big Papa and thought to myself, yeah, I like Big Papa better than This Time Around, but okay. It's
well, I think
interesting that
Michael
they had
gets,
this collaboration.
yeah, I think Michael or whoever was kind of working with Michael get massive props for bringing Biggie on. I mean, Biggie wasn't even that big, no pun intended, at that stage. I mean, he wasn't the legend that we know of now. So Michael grabbed him at like a stage where he was one of 100 rappers he could have chosen, maybe of a similar status.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Michael just heard something in the timbre of his voice, and he's like, "I like that." And I still
Yeah.
think Michael didn't really get what Biggie was about, because I saw him in an interview and he's like, "Notorious, big," but the way he said it was just like because most people would say Big or something.
Right.
So it's like the way he said it just kind of showed how out of touch he was in a
Mm.
way. But so that in a way that's charming. I will say it's like, in a way, yes. Now when we look back, like Biggie is the kind of standout aspect of the song. But when Michael featured raps, they were kind of, they usually are just this kind of cute little uh appendage to a song. You know, it's like a lot, like the way that rappers feature on a lot of R&B songs. They get their little 35-second 16 bars, and then you go back to the R&B song.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's a duet. You know, it's like, here's your little section. It's like even less than a bridge sometimes. So, but Biggie sounds great on it, in my opinion. I like that Biggie's really street. So some raps that have appeared on Michael's songs before, like on Black or White, are kind of a bit more cute in the lyrical content. Like on
Mm-hmm.
Black or White, it was nice, the rap feature, but it wasn't like Biggie talking about like coke and bitches, and you know, I'm not saying that's better, but it's like it does kind of give like a street flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that the last line is like, you know, he calls Mike his nigga. He's like, I know my nigga Mike, which is, you know, quite provocative in a way. So it's again like kind of bringing him into the black community,
Mm-hmm.
and saying like, if we go back to that Janet solidarity thing, it's like the streets are with Michael, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, anything else about this song?
Well, let's move on to Earth Song. This is
All right, Earth
still
Song
only
it
track
is.
5, and we
Okay,
just
okay,
hit
okay.
1 hour.
All right, don't worry, Mark. We're gonna get there. The first part of the album is more critical for me anyway.
Okay.
So, all right, you start on Earth Song.
Well, this is another great track. I heard that Larry Carlton played guitar on this album. If so, I think he's on this track. It sounds like it might be him. And this is another song written by Michael. It seems like the best songs on here are MJ compositions. Interestingly enough, from
R.
my
Kelly might have something to say
perspective, the
about
best
that,
ones.
but
Okay, who?
R.
You?
Kelly.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I'm the concern with the environment and so on reminds me of Stevie Wonder's Secret Life of Plants, which is, I mean, I like Stevie's song much better than Earth Song, but it's carrying on that tradition in a good way, and it's a solid track.
Okay, what I would add is just it's a song that kind of goes through different movements. So starts out quite lullaby-esque, and and ends up with the call and response gospel section with him and the Andre Crouch Choir, and that's the part of the track that is like absolutely exceptional for me. It's like that's the part that's like, wow, he's hit the, you know, the beginning part is like cool, but not really, doesn't really move me because it's a bit soft for my taste. And I think that's like always the line that I'm looking for Michael to hit, because I think Michael often veers into corny a little bit, and especially after,
Mawkish
like,
is the
especially
word
in,
that came to mind for me.
okay, okay, especially later, especially after History. Um, so that's like I'm always like, where are you on the line?
Right.
And that last part is just awesome when he's just like, what about us? What about, and you're able to like, I don't know, just Michael when he's like riffing like that and he's kind of less controlled is awesome to me. You know, I like the gospel like rough vibe. So that's the highlight of the
Mm-hmm.
track for me. Yeah, and as you already mentioned, Man in the Mirror. Um, so I think that the whole like "what about us" thing, if you think about like Man in the Mirror, like I'm talking to the man in the mirror. It's kind of like again like calling us to be to like we're saying "what about us," right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I kind of feel like he's again encouraging us to reflect on ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe he's more like including. He's more willing to include himself in the us there than he would be on like they don't care about us. Or I mean, I guess my point is like the they. He's distancing himself from like every. But here it's like no, we are the
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
Um, and I think that the lyrics are good on this album. On this track, like pretty impressive. I'll just highlight a couple of really quick tracks towards the end where I don't know. He says like, "What about the Holy Land torn apart by Creed?" It's interesting, just some of the stuff he's saying. Like, what about the common man? What about apathy? I don't know. Yeah, so yeah, it's a powerful indictment. I can see you're ready to move to the next one, yeah?
Well, I mean, I'm just watching the clock. That's my job.
Okay. All right, next track. DS. Dom Schnelden? Is that how I always forget because I'm gonna have to give the backstory about the Tom Snedden.
But Dom Sheldon is obviously a stand-in for Tom Snedden, the DA that brought the charges against MJ. So I mean, as a diss track, this is pretty weak. Like, Dom Sheldon is a cold man. Like, that's as harsh as it gets, I just think about that in comparison with one of the great diss tracks of all time, if not the greatest, a fatally great diss track. I'm thinking of Tupac's "Hit 'Em Up," like the invective on that compared to, Dom Sheldon is a cold man. I mean, it's pretty tame, right? The interesting thing, of course, is that you've got Slash on guitar, but I didn't feel like the solo was that inspiring. It might be partly because of the mix. It's like it doesn't explode out of the mix like it would on a Guns N' Roses track, maybe.
Right, it feels kind of restrained.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm glad that there was this kind of collaboration, there is a baby crying, so again we have another scream, and there have been screams all along. Like, actually every track before this and after Scream, there's of course very emotional shouting, and They Don't Care About Us. Stranger in Moscow has a.
I mean, Michael has always done stuff with his voice,
but yeah. I mean, in Earth Song, there's a kind of wail almost, right? And then here there's a baby crying. So again, that's a thread that runs through this entire record, I would think. But on the issue of the abuse, I remember it was around this time when Paul McCartney called MJ, and I mean, he had heard what was going on, and this was after he had bought the Beatles catalog, and there was some acrimony between them, of course, over that, but Paul was still supportive and friendly. He called him and said, "Keep your prick up," according to what Paul himself said. And MJ said, "I didn't do it." And Paul expressed his support and said, "Yeah, I believe you." I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what he would say now. I don't know what you think about that. Actually, I don't know what I think about it. Honestly, I mean, I've not.
Well, you watched Finding Neverland, right? I didn't.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't
either.
You
mean Leaving Neverland?
Yeah, Leaving Neverland.
That's the HBO documentary. I didn't know. I know people that have seen it, and they're completely convinced by it. So, take that for what it's worth. But I also know that one of the guys wanted to do the choreography for some project, and then when he didn't get it, this lawsuit appeared. So that's certainly an interesting fact. You can't ignore that aspect of it.
And he, for many years, said he was a big Michael Jackson fan, made a whole career basically as a choreographer, and would and denied all allegations.
Yeah, so I've certainly not investigated it.
And even upon Michael's death, was trying to be part of tributes and stuff.
So it's pretty suspicious. but doesn't.
I have to. Can we pause? Is that a thing we're allowed to do?
Yeah, we can do that.
Sorry, I just have to check this phone call.